Hello, Pinewood families. Today is Friday, April 3rd, and it is the end of 3 weeks of at-home school. But today's April 3rd, and that also means it's Emily's birthday. So happy birthday, Emily. I hope you have a great day today with your family. And if any of you out there want to send Emily a text or a message online, she would appreciate some birthday wishes. Happy birthday, Emily. Well, today we've got a few things to finish up off of this paper that you've been looking at for the last couple weeks. Some of you guys have moved away from this and onto Schoology because it's a more accurate description of what you need to do each day. But as of today, that paper will now be obsolete anyways, and we're going to be working off of Schoology. So hopefully you've been practicing and you figured out how to log on to that website and get to the courses, 5th grade AM, and subject by subject through your work. If you remember, I've been kind of talking through this week about what next week looks like and the fact that it is spring break and there will not be assigned work piled onto what you already have. So 2 things about that. Number 1, still keep going to those games. I know that you have time. I know that there's moments when you're bored. So it's Prodigy and Raz Kids and all those things that we have been going to online. Check them out next week. Just keep yourself fresh. Don't just waste the week away. Also, I would say that the only thing that if you have it unfinished from these last couple of weeks would be your writing pieces. And so first was your persuasive essay on the topic that you researched while we were back at school. Second was your narrative, your story that you wrote last week. And then last was this week, your literary essay on Hatchet. We'll talk more on that later. For your other work today, in math, you're going to be on SMJ, page 186. It is a math box, and there's specific directions for those problems inside of Schoology. There's a YouTube link for one of them. It's a little bit more of a difficult problem. So click on the link in Schoology, and it will give you a tutorial how to solve that problem. In science, there's a cool mystery science video on twins. I've always been curious about that. And in social studies, you're going to be watching episode 26, 27, 28. Throughout these episodes, you're seeing that the war is becoming more diverse. It's spreading out to a lot of different places, affecting a lot of different people. And there's some interesting topics in there for today. So keep on watching those as well. Coming back to writing, you should be finishing your final copy of your literary essay. Remember, one of the questions that we often ask when we revise and edit is, did I write what I was asked to write about? Did I stay on topic? Do I have things in there that don't belong in there? I have a guess, after teaching literary essays for a long time, that a few of you may have too many events or facts from the book that don't directly tie to your thesis statement. So that would be one of my challenges for you today, to look over your essay and to make some decisions. Are there some things that I need to pull out? Now, a suggestion would be, for every sentence you pull out, could you strengthen your paper by adding something else instead? So, for example, if you spend 4 sentences talking about something that happened in the book, can you shrink it down to 1 or 2 sentences? And then instead follow it up with 2 or 3 sentences of why does that matter? Final copies should be finished up today. Parents, you have the decision. You could either email me that or just hold on to it, and we're going to come up with some better ways to collect work within the next days. Well, today you are going to finish the book Hatchet, chapter 19, and the epilogue. It's a total of about 11 pages, and I'm going to do a read aloud today. And so if you would, go ahead and grab your copy of Hatchets, and we're going to begin in just a minute. While I'm waiting for everybody to go get those books who doesn't have them yet and not ready yet, today and tomorrow and Sunday are supposed to be quite a bit of sun. You see, I got my sunglasses and baseball hat on today. I was out walking. It is beautiful. Get outside, do something outside. Find somebody in your family to play catch with, whether that's a football or a baseball or a frisbee or whatever it is. Go for a walk. Find a park where you can still keep social distancing, and go for a walk. Go for a bike ride. Ride a skateboard. Do something. Get some exercise, get some fresh air, and get out there in the world. Stay safe, but get out there. We're going to begin in chapter 19 here in just a minute. Chapter 19 is starting on page 184. Excuse me. If you remember, Brian had just finally got the emergency pack or the survival pack out of the plane. It had been way harder than he thought, but he had made it. He had made his way to the pack, got it back on shore, and at this moment in chapter 19, he has been asleep for most of the night, exhausted, and he was even so tired that he couldn't get everything out and see what was in there until the morning time. This is where we're going to pick up. It's chapter 19, page 184. Treasure. Unbelievable riches. He could not believe the contents of the survival pack. The night before, he was so numb with exhaustion, he couldn't do anything but sleep. All day in the water had tired him out so much that, in the end, he had fallen asleep sitting against his shelter wall, oblivious even to the mosquitoes, to the night, to anything. But with false gray dawn, he had awakened instantly, and he began to dig in the pack to find amazing, wonderful things. There was a sleeping bag, which he hung to dry over his shelter roof on the outside, and a foam sleeping pad. An aluminum cook set with 4 little pots and 2 frying pans. It actually even had a fork and a knife and a spoon. A waterproof container with matches and 2 small butane lighters. A sheathed knife with a compass in the handle. As if a compass would help him, he thought, smiling. A first aid kit with bandages and tubes of antiseptic paste and small scissors. A cap that said Cessna across the front in large letters. Why a cap, he wondered. It was adjustable, and he put it on immediately. A fishing kit with 4 coils of line, a dozen small lures and hooks and sinkers. Incredible wealth. It was like all the holidays in the world, all the birthdays there were. He sat in the sun by the doorway where he had dropped the night before and pulled the presents, as he thought of them, out one at a time to examine them, turn them over in the light, to touch them and feel them with his hands and eyes. Something that at first puzzled him. He pulled out what seemed to be the broken-off, bulky stock of a rifle, and he was going to put it aside, thinking that it must be for something else in the pack, when he shook it, and it rattled. After working at it a moment, he found the butt of the stock came off, and inside there was a barrel and a magazine and an action assembly with a clip and a full box of 50 shells. It was a .22 survival rifle he had seen once in the sporting goods store where he went for bike parts, and the barrel screwed out onto the stock. He had never owned a rifle, never even fired one, but he'd seen them on television, of course, and after a few moments he figured out how to put it together by screwing the action onto the stock, how to load it, and put the clip full of bullets into the action. It was a strange feeling holding that rifle. It somehow removed him from everything around him. Without the rifle, he had to fit in, to be part of it all, to understand it and use it. The woods, all of it. With a rifle, suddenly, he didn't have to know. He didn't have to be afraid or understand. He didn't have to get close to a full bird to kill it. He didn't even have to know how it would stand if he didn't look at it and moved off to the side. The rifle changed him. The minute he picked it up, and he wasn't sure he liked that change very much. He set it aside, leaning it carefully against the wall. He could deal with that feeling later. The fire was out, and he used a butane lighter and a piece of birch bark with small twigs to get another one started, marveling at how easy it was, but feeling again that the lighter somehow removed him from where he was, what he had to know. With a ready flame, he didn't have to know how to make a spark nest or how to feed the new flames to make them grow. As with the rifle, he wasn't sure he liked the change. Up and down, he thought. The pack was wonderful, but it gave him up and down feelings. With the fire going and sending up black smoke with a steady roar from a pitch-smelling chunk he had put on, he turned once more to the pack. Rummaging through the food packets, he hadn't brought them out yet because he had wanted to save them until last. Glory in them. He came up with a small electronic device completely encased in a plastic bag. At first he thought it was a radio or a cassette player, and he had the surge of hope because he missed music. He missed sound, missed hearing another voice. But when he opened the plastic and took the thing out and turned it over, he could see that it wasn't a receiver at all. There was a coil of wire held together on the side by tape, and it sprung into a 3-foot-long antenna when he took the tape off. No speaker, no lights, just a small switch at the top, and on the bottom, he finally found in small print, emergency transmitter. That was it. He turned the switch back and forth a few times, but nothing happened. He couldn't even hear static. So, as with the rifle, he set it against the wall and he went back to the bag. It was probably ruined in the crash, he thought. 2 bars of soap. He had bathed regularly in the lake, but not with soap, and he thought how wonderful it would be to wash his hair. It was thick with grime and smoked dirt, frizzed by wind and sun, matted with fish and foolbird grease. His hair had grown and stuck and tangled and grown until it was a clumped mess on his head. He could use the scissors from the first aid kit to cut it off and then wash it with soap. And then, finally, the food. It was all freeze-dried and in such quantity, they thought. With this, I could live forever. Package after package he took out. Beef dinners with potatoes, cheese and noodle dinners, chicken dinners, egg and potato breakfasts, fruit mixes, drink mixes, dessert mixes. More dinners and breakfasts than he could count easily. Dozens and dozens of them, all packed in waterproof bags, all in perfect shape. And when he had them all laid out and against the wall in stacks, he couldn't stand it, and he went through them again. If I'm careful, he thought, they'll last as long as I need them to last. If I'm careful. No, not yet. I won't be careful yet. First, I'm going to have a feast. Right here and now, I'm going to cook up a feast and eat until I drop, and then I'll be careful. He went into the food packs once more, and he selected what he wanted for his feast. A 4-person beef and potato dinner, with orange drink for an appetizer and something called a peach whip for dessert. Just add water, it said in the packages, and cook for half an hour or so until everything was normal size and done. Brian went to the lake and got water in one of the aluminum pots and came back to the fire. Just that amazed him. To be able to carry water to the fire in a pot. Such a simple act, and he hadn't been able to do it for almost 2 months. He guessed at the amounts, and he put the beef dinner and peach dessert on to boil. And then he went back to the lake and brought water to mix with the orange drink. It was sweet and tangy, almost too sweet, but so good that he didn't drink it fast. He held it in his mouth and let the taste go over his tongue, tickling on the sides, sloshing it back and forth, and then down, swallow, then another. That, he thought, that's just fine. Just fine. He got more lake water and mixed another one and drank it fast, and then a third one, and he sat with that near the fire, but looking out across the lake, thinking how rich the smell was from cooking the beef dinner. There was garlic in it and some of the spices, and the smells came up to him, and it made him think of home, his mother cooking, the rich smells of the kitchen. And at that precise moment, with his mind full of home and the smell of the food filling him, the plane appeared. He had only a moment of warning. There was a tiny drone, but as before, it didn't register, and then suddenly, roaring over his head, low and in back of the ridge, a bush plane with floats fairly exploded into his life. It passed directly over him, very low, tipped a wing sharply over the tail of the crashed plane in the lake, cut power, glided down the long part of the L of the lake, and then turned and glided back, touching the water gently once, twice, and settling with the spray to taxi and stop with its floats gently bumping the beach in front of Brian's shelter. He had not moved. It all happened so fast that he hadn't moved. He sat with the pot of orange drink still in his hand, staring at the plane, not quite understanding it yet, not quite knowing yet that it was over. The pilot cut the engine, opened the door, and got out, balanced, and stepped forward on the float to hop onto the sand without even getting his feet wet. He was wearing sunglasses, and he took them off to stare at Brian. "I heard your emergency transmitter, and then I saw the plane when I came over." He trailed off, cocked his head, studying Brian. "Damn, you're him, aren't you? You're that kid. They quit looking 2 months ago. You're him, aren't you? You're that kid." Brian was standing now, but still silent, still holding the drink. His tongue seemed to be stuck to the roof of his mouth, and his throat didn't work right. He looked at the pilot and the plane, and down at himself, dirty and ragged, burned and lean and tough, and he coughed to clear his throat. "My name is Brian Robeson," he said, and then he saw that his stew was done and the peach whip almost done, and he waved to it with his hand. "Would you like something to eat?" Sometimes books have something called an epilogue. An epilogue means it is words that come after something is over. It often fast forwards or scoots forward to a different time, sometimes minutes later, sometimes days later. Sometimes it's more of the after story of what happened after the book technically already ended. Well, here's the epilogue for Hatchet. The pilot who landed so suddenly in the lake was a fur buyer mapping Cree trapping camps for future buying runs. He was drawn by Brian when he unwittingly turned on the emergency transmitter and left it going. The Cree moved into the camps for fall and winter to trap, and the buyers fly from camp to camp on a regular route. When the pilot rescued Brian, he had been alone on the L-shaped lake for 54 days. During that time, he had lost 17% of his body weight. He later gained back 6%, but he had virtually no body fat. His body had consumed all extra weight, and he would remain lean and wiry for several years. Many of the changes would prove to be permanent. Brian had gained immensely in his ability to observe what was happening and react to it. That would last him all his life. He had become more thoughtful as well, and from that time on, he would think slowly about something before speaking. Food, all food, even food he didn't like, never lost its wonder for him. For years after his rescue, he would find himself stopping in grocery stores to just stare at the aisles of food, marveling at the quantity and the variety. There were many questions in his mind about what he had seen and known, and he had worked at research when he got back, identifying the game and berries. Those gut cherries were termed choke cherries, and they made good jelly. The nut bushes where the fool birds were hazelnut bushes. The two kinds of rabbits were snowshoes and cottontails. The fool birds were ruffed grouse, and they were also called fool hens by trappers for their stupidity. The small food fish were bluegills, sunfish, and perch. The turtle eggs were laid by a snapping turtle, as he had thought. The wolves were timber wolves, which were not known to attack or bother people. The moose was just a moose. There were also the dreams. He had many dreams about the lake after he was rescued. The Canadian government sent a team to recover the body of the pilot, and they took reporters who naturally took pictures and film of the whole campsite, the shelter, all of it. For a brief time, the press made much of Brian, and he was interviewed for several networks, but the furor died within a few months. A writer showed up who wanted to do a book on the complete adventure, as he had called it, but he turned out to be a dreamer, and it all came to nothing but talk. Still, Brian was given copies of the pictures and tape, and looking at them seemed to trigger the dreams. They weren't nightmares, none of them were frightening, but he would awaken at times with them, just awaken and sit up and think of the lake, the forest, the fire at night, the night birds singing, the fish jumping, sit in the dark alone and think of them, and it was not bad and would never be bad for him. Predictions are, for the most part, ineffective, but it might be interesting to note that had Brian not been rescued when he was, had he been forced to go into hard fall, perhaps winter, it would have been very rough for him. When the lake froze, he would have lost the fish, and when the snow got deep, he would have had trouble moving at all. Game becomes seemingly plentiful in the fall, and it's easier to see with the leaves off the brush, but in winter it gets scarce and sometimes non-existent as predators. Fox, lynx, wolf, owls, weasel, fisher, marten, northern coyote, they sweep through the areas and they wipe things out. It was amazing what a single owl can do to a local population of ruffed grouse and rabbits in just a few months. After the initial surprise and happiness from his parents at home and being alive, for a week it looked as if they might get together. Things rapidly went back to normal. His father returned to the northern oil fields, where Brian eventually visited him, and his mother stayed in the city, worked at her career in real estate, and continued to see the man in the station wagon. Brian tried several times to tell his father, came really close once to doing it, but in the end, he never said a word about the man or what he knew, the secret. What a great book. It's funny, after reading Sign of the Beaver and then reading Hatchet, I'm sure that you've seen a bunch of connections, and that's one thing that readers always do. They connect things that they read to other things that they read. So, my hope is that you've been working hard on your literary essay for Hatchet this week, and as you finish the book, maybe a few ideas that you want to add in, another piece of evidence from the end of the book about your thesis statement that helps prove it. Maybe something that'll go back into paragraph 4 that might have a sentence in it that sounds like, in the end of the book, or near the end of the book, comma, and that's where you add your evidence. Well, there you have it. This is today's video for Friday, April 3rd. Again, happy birthday to Emily, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will talk to you next week.